He was the face of Hollywood decency, stoic, noble, and untouchable. But in his later years, Gregory Peck finally dropped the act. In a quiet, reflective moment near the end of his life, he revealed a secret he'd carried for over half a century. It wasn't about fame or fortune, or even tragedy. It was about her, the woman he never stopped thinking about, and the one love he never truly got over. Before he became Hollywood royalty, Gregory Peck was just Eldred Gregory Peck, a tall, solemn boy growing up in La Jolla, California. His parents divorced when he was 6, and he was raised primarily by his grandmother. It wasn't a childhood of glitter and movie reels. It was quiet, humble, and shaped by absence. Originally, Peck didn't dream of stardom. He studied English and pre-med at Berkeley, preparing for a life in medicine. But something shifted when he stepped onto a campus stage. The crowd fell silent. He felt seen. And just like that, the white coat gave way to stage lights. Peck's early life forged the quiet dignity he'd later bring to roles that defined American cinema. He didn't come into the industry with swagger. He carried himself like someone who had something to prove, but no need to shout about it. That understated confidence would become his trademark. But behind the composed exterior, there was always more brewing, something unspoken. And soon, Hollywood would come calling. He made his film debut in Days of Glory in 1944. Tall, commanding, and impossibly noble, Peck didn't need to play anti-heroes or charm his way through scripts. He embodied decency, integrity, that rare kind of man who could make silence feel like a monologue. Then came To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962. As Atticus Finch, he became a symbol. The performance earned him an Oscar, but more importantly, it cemented him in the public imagination as the gold standard of moral courage. He wasn't just acting, he was the voice of reason in an increasingly chaotic world. Off-screen, he spoke out against injustice, stood against the McCarthy blacklist, and supported civil rights and anti-war efforts. But for all his public heroism, Gregory Peck kept his private life sealed tight. And that's where the cracks begin to show. Because while the cameras captured a man of unwavering strength, the truth buried deep behind his eyes told a more complicated story. In 1942, at the very start of his Hollywood ascent, Peck married Greta Kukkonen, a poised Finnish-American woman who brought grace and stability to his life. They had 3 sons together and, from the outside, looked like the perfect mid-century family. But fame doesn't make space for quiet lives. As Peck's star rose, so did the pressure. He was on set, on screens, on magazine covers, everywhere but home. Greta, ever composed, held the family together as best she could, but the emotional distance between them widened as Hollywood demanded more and more of Gregory. Eventually, the weight of it all cracked the foundation. In 1955, after over a decade of marriage, they quietly divorced. The public saw a movie star in control. What they didn't see was a man struggling to balance duty, desire, and the growing realization that the life he'd built might not be enough. And just before that marriage fully unraveled, something happened on a film set, something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was 1945 when Gregory Peck was cast opposite Ingrid Bergman in Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound. On screen, their chemistry was electric, intense, magnetic, undeniable. But what audiences didn't know was that the fire wasn't just acting. Behind the scenes, something real was brewing. Peck was married. Bergman was too. But long hours on set and the emotional demands of the film blurred the lines. And somewhere between the camera takes, something unspoken turned into something unforgettable. Filming was a demanding experience, emotionally and psychologically. The movie dove deep into themes of memory, guilt, and desire. Territory that left its mark on both stars. Peck, still relatively new to major roles, reportedly suffered from intense nightmares during production. The emotional strain of the role weighed on him heavily, and Bergman, already a seasoned actress, often became a calming presence between scenes. Meanwhile, Hitchcock kept his usual distance from the emotional needs of his actors, leaving them to navigate their on-screen intimacy and off-screen connection on their own. Adding to the surreal atmosphere was a dream sequence designed by Salvador Dali, a disorienting blend of melting clocks and symbolic imagery that mirrored the emotional confusion both were experiencing. And beneath it all, a deeper tension lingered. Both stars were married, adding a layer of guilt and restraint to a romance that neither of them fully expected. Years later, in a rare interview, Peck admitted what had long been whispered in Hollywood circles. He and Bergman had shared a brief but deeply felt affair. A collision of timing, duty, and the kind of connection that doesn't just disappear when the credits roll. When Spellbound wrapped, there was no dramatic goodbye. No love letters, no tearful airport scene. Just two stars returning to their lives like nothing had happened. Bergman, already one of the most admired actresses in the world, went straight into more high-profile projects. The Bells of St. Mary's, Joan of Arc, and eventually her controversial collaboration and romance with Italian director Roberto Rossellini. She kept moving forward, constantly in the public eye, reinventing herself with each film. Peck, still early in his career, dove into work too. He filmed The Yearling, Gentleman's Agreement, and a string of war dramas and literary adaptations that established him as Hollywood's most principled leading man. And yet, behind the professionalism, something lingered. They never worked together again, never appeared at events side by side. It was as if the connection had to be buried, on purpose. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was self-preservation, or maybe it was just too painful to keep alive. In 1955, after 13 years of marriage and 3 sons together, Peck and his wife Greta divorced. The very next day he married Veronique Pisani, a French journalist he'd met years earlier during a press interview. Their relationship started with a lunch invitation and slowly grew into something lasting. Veronique wasn't part of the Hollywood machine. She was sharp, elegant, and grounded. Everything Peck needed after the emotional chaos of the past decade. Together, they had 2 children, and built a life defined by steadiness rather than spectacle. Veronique stood by him through awards, political activism, and personal loss. Their marriage endured nearly 50 years, a rare feat in his industry. But while he loved her deeply, something always lingered beneath the surface. He never spoke of it publicly, not yet. But behind the tuxedos and handshakes, Peck carried the weight of a fleeting connection from long ago. And with each passing year, the memory only deepened, because even in the safest harbors, some storms never fully pass. Success never shielded him from pain. In 1975, his eldest son Jonathan was found dead at just 30 years old. The cause was ruled as self-inflicted, a sudden and devastating loss that shattered the illusion of control Peck had maintained for decades. Friends said he was never the same after that. The man known for playing calm, moral heroes on screen was suddenly forced to confront a kind of grief that no script could prepare him for. Peck spoke candidly about the loss in rare moments, calling it the most terrible thing that had ever happened to him. He admitted he would never fully recover. The tragedy carved something raw into him, an invisible scar that softened the way he saw the world. It was a reminder that even the most composed lives can crack under the weight of personal heartbreak. And it made what came next, the quiet confession of a lifelong emotional wound, all the more poignant. Because sometimes it takes great loss to finally speak the truth. In a candid interview with People magazine in 1987, Gregory Peck finally broke decades of silence. After a lifetime of restraint, he let slip the truth about what happened on the set of Spellbound, and how deeply it had stayed with him. "All I can say is, I had a real love for her, and I think that's where I ought to stop," he said, referring to Ingrid Bergman. He didn't offer details. He didn't need to. The emotion in his voice told the story. He added quietly, "She was like a lovely Swedish rose. I was young. She was young. We were involved for weeks in close and intense work. There was no scandal to dig up, no dramatic fallout, just 2 people, at the height of their careers, caught in something real and too fragile for the world to see. And though they each moved on, built families, and lived out separate lives, that brief connection stayed with him. Because some people don't just pass through your life, they leave a mark. And for Gregory Peck, that mark was hers.